Hey, this is Alex from the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. To see more videos like this from the Good Old Boys, hit subscribe and support this independent podcast.
Chris Godwin finished wide receiver 20 last year, 104 receptions, 147 targets, 1,023 yards, 3 touchdowns, an average of 9.5 targets per game. Thoughts on Chris Godwin?
I like Godwin a touch more than I like Mike Evans this year, just because of how his typical route tree runs. Godwin can play in the slot and does play in the slot more than Chris Godwin. He's going to be running some shorter routes, some in-cutting routes more often than not. While both guys have good hands, Godwin, there was a reason Godwin was the go-to for Tom Brady, right? Like when both guys were healthy, Mike Evans got the deep shots and got a lot of the touchdowns, but Godwin is the guy who made the chains move, and I think he's still going to be using that skill set and that route combination with these new quarterbacks. So I do think that he will become the wide receiver security blanket, if you will, where if things kind of go to hell in a handbasket, they're going to look to Godwin first because he's more often than not going to be running a route that is closer to the quarterback and easier to complete.
So, yeah, well, I agree with you, Kevin. And Godwin's not going much higher than Mike Evans is going. It's about 10, 12 spots. He's going about a round before Mike Evans right now. But I'll tell you what, I really like Chris Godwin in a best ball situation. Like he's going to be fine in a redraft, but in a best ball, I mean, this guy has the ability to be a game changer. But again, I think you're going to have to ride the wave that is the inconsistency of the quarterback position down there in Tampa. And so I think there will be games where he will just be absolutely electric and lights out and, go over 100 yards on, 8, 9, 10 catches on like 12 or 11 targets and have a touchdown or two mixed in there. But realistically, like any pass catcher that you get from Tampa Bay, you're going to have to just hope that there's more upswings than there are downswings when it comes to the consistency at the quarterback position.
Chris Godwin, again, right? Like you just said, it coming off the board, kind of wide receiver, 30-ish, 59th overall type of deal. Like that puts him squarely at the back end of the 5th round to it. And there's other guys that I'd rather go with the 5th round, right? We've kind of hit that one up already where you're potentially even starting off like wide receiver, and then filling in some of those running backs to it. Like, yeah, I think really if push came to shove, I think I'd rather draft Rachaad White over Chris Godwin in that same spot. Just kind of nature of the beast there. But brings me to a question, kind of looking at some of these ADPs here as well. So tell me who you'd rather have. I'm going to name 3 wide receivers, and we'll just go with who you'd rank them 1, 2, 3 on those. Wide receivers are Chris Godwin, Christian Kirk, Michael Pittman. Out of those 3, how you ranking them?
Oh God,
Christian Kirk.
Yeah, you almost have to go.
Then.
Yeah, you almost have to go Kirk by default, right? Because Pittman's got presumably Anthony Richardson throwing him the football, which means he presumably has Anthony Richardson throwing him the football at some point. Godwin, you're going to have either Baker or Trask, right? So you'd have to go with Kirk because Trevor Lawrence is a quarterback. That's really what it boils down to, is that the guy who actually has a legit throwing consistent quarterback is the one that is the safest play.
Chris Godwin is a guy that I think can probably return some value, but there's other routes that I'd rather go there when it's all said and done.